Good morning. Look, I've got people online. Thank you. People are struggling in here in person. We've got a couple of folks. This is going to be a fun meeting. I'm going to try and keep this fast paced. And let me share my screen. Ooh, can I do that? Hopefully that's where I want to go. Again, I'm Melissa Schwartz, the managing broker of the Realty One Group Paradise Valley office. And I'm going to see if I can, everybody's hidden, eh? All right, so let me go to a slideshow presentation. Folks, unfortunately, I cannot see the chat. I don't know how to open. Well, let me hold on a second. Let me see if I can get the chat visible to me. Where'd my thing go? I have no control. Where'd the control bar go? Huh. Okay, stop sharing for just a second. Let me see if I can get my chat so I can at least see that from you guys. Because once I go into that, I cannot see it. All right, so let's try again and share my screen. Hope everybody's having a good Tuesday. Of course, in the chat does not show up, so. All right, now that's way out of the way. Okay, I cannot see the chat, so if you want to say anything, you're going to have to unmute, and please tell me I am recording again. I am recording. Look at that little guy. Okay. I cannot believe we are on May 21st. It is flying by. All right, so today is just a fun Tuesday, staying out of the hot seat. What started this was some things that came through in my broker review files. Please, 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 no names are being shared. No agent names are being shared. So if something pops up that you know about, because you're the agent, please don't comment. I'm protecting you. If you decide to comment, that's on your own behalf. I just am using them as examples. And again, I've crossed out names. Nobody is visible on any of this. So let's get started. If it's going to let me do that, let's press a button here. Okay. So, you know, it's funny. We have this amazing system, SkySlope. How many of you have heard of that? SkySlope is our big file cabinet. And the thing that is important about the file cabinet is it's like this huge system that allows you to create a folder and put information in that folder. And I can see that. Our compliance people can see that. Our office administrators can see that. And there are a whole bunch of little red asterisk things that talk about, you know, client communication and client information. And it's amazing, but those little red asterisks mean you're supposed to fill in that information. It's amazing how many times people avoid filling in the accurate information, especially the phone and email. Now, I'm going to ask people online to unmute and answer why would it be important for that information for client phone and email to actually be in that file folder where other Realty One Group, let's say administrators, can access it. Anybody got an idea? Well, that's true. I've got Title here that's commenting on it. Art is here with Rock Title, and he's saying, because escrow needs that information. But why else? Somebody online, go ahead and unmute. The people here have run away for 2 seconds. I'm trying to get the one in the corner there to come out of our office. But why would it be important for that? Can somebody share from online?
Yeah, maybe when pretty much we close in a house, if you need to reach out, this, you know, the buyers or something, you will have access.
That is a good thing, right? If we get a phone call where somehow we have to be able to reach somebody and we can't reach you. When else? Wait, what time of year is coming up? What time of year are we in?
Audit.
No audit. That might be a time of year, but I don't know. It's a specific time of year. It's May. What's coming next? Vacations. So when you leave, right? Who is watching your files? Oops, I don't want that. I don't know why that's doing that. This is what I'm talking about, buyer information, if this is your client. So Who manages your file when you are traveling?
The artist is giving you information.
We are still responsible by the broker, maybe?
A colleague.
So if you are traveling and cannot be reached, you are at the bottom of Yosemite, you are on a cruise ship, you are hiking the Himalayas, I don't care. But guess what? If you can't be reached and something happens and we have no email or phone number, how on earth do we reach your client? Because this is the only place we have that information. So please, it's just a faulty chair. Pick another one. So please fill out this information. It really, really is important. It is quite concerning as we head into the holidays and people taking vacations that we have that contact information. Now, I'm not going to hit each of these. Obviously, buyer or seller, really critical if they are your client that we have their phone number and email available. Lender, I would say that information should also be on there. Agent representing the other side, that we're going to be able to find in the contract, right? Although it would be nice to have it in here so it's in one location, but that we can at least find. We cannot find your client information, and we know you know it, but that file folder, that's what SkySlope is all about, right? If our office has to call somebody, we don't have that information. I know you've got it in your phone. That's fantastic. We don't have access to your phone if you're off in the middle of nowhere. Okay, so I had a great conversation with Art about this. So we've had this come up a couple of times, but this is becoming more and more popular, whether by assignment or, oh, you know, the mother-in-law needs to be added, or the son needs to be added, or the grandparents need to be added. It doesn't really matter. You know, let's say you're doing it in 2 days right after the contract's been written. Does it really matter? Nothing's happened. Well, I don't know about that, but what happens if it's 15 days into the process? Melissa, Melissa Gasper's here. I'm not talking to myself. So Melissa, I know, what do I think? What would happen if you add a buyer to that contract, say 15 days into the escrow, halfway through the escrow? Can you just write John Smith to be added to the transaction as a borrower and an owner? That's what this says, right? There's a seller credit, and then per the pre-approval. So isn't that nice? The pre-qual or pre-approval had somebody else's name on it. Great. Okay, so throw their name on the contract. Title's going to say, yeah, it doesn't matter. We just need their name. Lender's going to say, we don't care. We just need their name. Who needs more information than that?
From my experience, I just put, and it's usually not on the pre-approval because that would be their first, but like, you know, Melissa Schwartz to be added as a spouse, as a non-borrowing spouse, typically to the title. But
okay, that's to title.
mhm.
Okay, but then if it's to title, why are we putting it in our contract?
Oh, this is on the additional.
This is an additional clause addendum, or this is this is an additional addendum, just an addendum, right? There's a credit, and then we're adding a buyer. Anybody online want to throw out a comment? This is just an addendum. You know, people write addendums all the time. I get amazing addendums. They're quite fascinating. We'll see a few more here.
Well, I don't understand why they wouldn't just put buyer to be John and Jessica Smith.
Great point. But you've already done your inspections. So John Smith has just been added.
Oh, to the whole thing. So he needs to sign all the other documents too, you mean?
Oh, wait a minute. Now that's an interesting
I'm just adding
point.
them to title, right? Like with through.
Okay.
As a non-borrower.
So if somebody is being added in the middle of the transaction and not just a title, so I will grant that to Melissa Gasper. Sometimes there's somebody just being added to title. That should not be on our documents. If that is being done at title, title can do that. They have nothing to do with the purchase contract, okay? But if you're changing the purchase contract, you have to understand, you throw a new buyer in there, the inspections have already been done. John Smith's been added. What happens after the fact when John says, I didn't know there was a septic system. I didn't approve the inspection report. What do you mean there was this? Who is at fault? Who has to remedy that?
The agent.
The agent has to remedy that. I think the agent will have fun in the court of law that's gonna have to address that. Cause it's out of our hands after closing. And that agent, that buyer comes back and says, I never got the contracts. I didn't agree to this. But you added them.
Yeah, I
So-
think one question we always have to ask as realtors is, whenever we find new information, who else needs to know? Because our whole job is just communicating to everyone.
So let me make sure people online heard that. Did you guys hear Melissa on that? Somebody give me, I can't see any photos, anything.
Yes, I could hear.
I
Okay,
didn't hear.
so you didn't hear. Okay, so the comment was that anytime we make a change in the contract, who needs to be made aware of that? I would add to that and say, what impact does that change have in the contract? So when you're adding a name, well, it's just not just a name, it's a buyer with a capital B. Every place in that contract that references that buyer is now being impacted, to use Melissa's word, it's being impacted. So you've got to address it. I mean, by signing below, they've received all contract documents, everything and addended, and all contingencies and conditions have been satisfied or removed and approved the condition of the property, right? All of that has to be done in one little paragraph, right? And who is getting the contract to them, by the way? Who? The spouse? The parents? Oh, no, it's you. Agents. And who needs to keep proof that you delivered that information to them?
We do.
You do, right? Because you are saying they're getting this information. Are they supposed to be getting that information before you have them sign this addendum?
Not necessarily.
Really? Because it says they've received all contract documents.
Yeah.
That means they've already gotten them. It is your job to make sure they have all of them, that if they have any questions, that you answer those before they sign this, because they're approving that they're moving forward on this. Now, I understand 9 times out of 10, that person has been involved the whole time. They've been getting copies of emails. They've been involved in it. They just weren't on the contract. But guess what? When they're going on the contract, when this step is being taken, you need to email every last document you have sent that has been signed in a packet to that buyer, to that seller, so you show they have in fact received them.
What's the circumstance that this would take place?
Oh, we're getting people added to contracts all the time.
So they
all
maybe
the
just
time.
are like become a cosigner or
Cosigner.
FHA.
Co-signer needs somebody else on there, or
Okay.
yeah, for whatever reason. I'm seeing it all the time. This is like the 5th I've had in a month.
Yeah.
That, oh, we're just adding a
Interesting.
buyer. You can't just add a buyer. And see, here the problem is, you will undoubtedly have the lender say, oh, just add the buyer to the contract. That's what they're gonna say. They're not an attorney.
They don't know what that
They
means.
don't know our contract, right? This is why I'm saying this keeps you out of the hot seat. If I see that come through, I'm immediately calling you and asking, where is the release from this buyer? Right? And usually I'm getting it to sign off on it. Oh, I don't know, 3 days prior to closing. What happens if you're now presenting something to them that they don't like? That's going to be on you guys. So you're going to have an issue if they have an issue with the contract because you didn't give them this stuff 2 weeks ago. Right? So if you're adding somebody after you're already under contract, they have to review the contract. So you need to take time to make sure that new person understands the whole process. Because, I think Melissa's right. Oftentimes it's just somebody being added to title. We're seeing more and more title, or the lender says, put them on the contract. And all they say, just add their name, not a problem. It is a huge problem. Go ahead, title,
I
Scott.
mean, I don't mean to interrupt, but if the lender's gonna put them on the deed of trust, they have to be on the contract. If you send me a contract, mom and dad are on the contract, you wanna add the son to the contract, they put the son on the deed of trust, my contract between the mom and the dad, the son has got nothing to do with the contract, so I can't put him on title just because the lenders put him on the deed of trust. He has to be on the contract. Okay, and it happens a lot of times with names. I'll give you an example. My name's Arthur A. Cedabaca Jr. I go by Art Cedabaca. But when they run my credit, they run Arthur A. Cedabaca Jr. I run a contract, I sign a contract with Art Cedabaca. They do the deed of trust as Arthur A. Cedabaca Jr. I can't, as escrow, just go and change the name to Arthur A. Cedabaca Jr. because Arthur A. Cedabaca Jr., my dad's senior, I'm junior, my son's a third, and my grandson's a fourth.
Oh,
So
God.
it could be a deal between my dad and this seller. It could be a deal between my son and this seller, or it could be me and this seller. So you have to clarify, because we get all the time, John Smith. Or they get out, well, it's John W. Smith. Okay, well, how many John Smiths out there? I got a contract with John Smith, not John W. Smith. So I have to have a addendum correcting the name of the buyer to be John W. Smith. I just can't change the title because the lender said, well, we approved him as John W. Smith, so you need to do it. No, my contract was John Smith, not John W. Smith. And that, and this, I mean, and it happens all the time, and it's a mistake because I come to you and say, hey, I'm Art Cedabaca, I want to buy this house, you know, and then they run my credit, and it's Arthur A. Cedabaca Jr., and it's a whole, but it happens all the time, and it's an innocent mistake because you as an agent don't know my name's Arthur A. Cedabaca Jr. You're trusting I'm gonna tell you what my name is. So, but that happens a lot, but we just can't add people to salary because they've been put on the deed of trust.
Well, and again, changing a name is different than adding somebody. And so if you need to change a name, you can absolutely do an addendum and say, all buyers' names shall be amended to read on all contract documents, Melissa K. Schwartz, or Arthur A. C.
Don't
Okay,
try it.
I'm not trying that. All right. Does anybody have any questions about that? All right. Okay, we're gonna move on. Now, I don't know if you guys can read this. I'm sorry, this is the size it got to me. This is between two agents. We represented the seller, and the first line is the buyer's agent. Excuse me. It says, as I spoke with the buyers, they say any minor issues will not affect the closing. However, any untold, unexplained, unseen, and unspecified major issue, and I didn't finish it, right? Our agent is trying to get the seller property disclosure statement signed by the buyer. I know you can't read it. Our agent said, we appreciate the correspondence. As the seller, and I've been wondering what's going on. The purchase contract shows the buyer and seller agreed to. And then the buyer's agent says, good morning. Yes, it's for the buyer's knowledge, but any major issues will be the seller responsibility. Not quite sure what that means. Then our client says, can you please have the buyer sign off on the SPUDs and send it back? And the buyer's agent says the SPUDs did not describe or indicate any major issues. So why you want the buyer sign off the SPUDs? Can you please explain about? And our agent said, maybe you should talk with your broker. There is a buyer initial spot at the bottom of each page and place for the buyer to sign on the last page. So the agent in bold text says, the buyer's agent, so you mean you need a signed copy of the SPUDs, right? Now, of course, this was actually what was uploaded, and I'm glad the agent did this, right? We're asking the agent, where's the signed SPUDs? He's been trying to get this. He squished all of his emails together so we could see the top line of each of these saying he's been trying to get the SPUD signed, put that in here. So my question to you is, do you have to submit a buyer signed copy of the SPUDs in SkySlope? Anybody want to answer that?
Yeah.
I've got a
Yes.
yes. Anybody online?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
The word.
Is it in the contract?
Yes.
Could somebody read to me what that says? Somebody want to read out loud?
The seller shall deliver a completed SPUDs to the buyer within 3 days of contract acceptance, and the buyer shall provide notice of any SPUDs disapproved items within the inspection period or 5 days from receipt, whichever is later. So do they need it signed? No.
So
Would it be nice? Yeah.
did it say anywhere that the buyer has to return the spuds?
Hmm,
Just
Hmm?
the.
Or sign, doesn't say they have to sign.
hmm,
Well, the only thing the buyer is signing when they sign the spuds is that they have received them. Right? That's all it says is they've received them. But technically, no, it is not required. Okay. Yes, our office wants to see them. Why? Because we want to know that they were delivered. And this brings up a really good point. Is it considered delivery if they are listed and attached in the MLS?
No.
mm-mm,
No.
no.
How many of you, you could, how many of you are installing them in the MLS as
Mhm.
proof that you delivered them?
Yeah,
And-
probably.
And this is why this is such an important point, right? You are responsible for getting those sellers' spuds over to the buyer within that 3 days. You should be keeping track of that delivery, because if in fact they do not come back to you, you do need to show that you delivered them. That's what we need to know, right? So the agent's funny email, right? But it shows in the bottom, it says they were delivered to you. And the other agent has acknowledged he's read them, right? He knows, and he's given them to the buyers because they've talked about them, said that they have no notice of any major issues. Well, that's good. That's the point of them, right? But so let me ask you this, how is a good way to make sure you show you delivered them? What are a couple of ways you can do that? Okay, Art is saying using the receipt required. Does everybody know that in your email system, you can check a box that says receipt required and it will send it back to you? Okay, that is one way. What's another way?
Well, so in the contract under notices, you can email, fax, hand deliver, or overnight courier. That's it.
Okay, so email, fax, hand deliver, or overnight courier
It's
Um,
considered delivery.
is considered delivery. But I'm just saying technically, what is a way, most people email, so what's a way when you email something that you have proof that it went through? I mean, you don't need the proof, by the way,
Right.
but just how do you show?
So,
Please, what is it,
Please
people
respond.
write? Advise if received or something like
So,
that.
so we've got two different
Response,
comments
please.
here. Please respond to confirm receipt. You could do that.
Mhm.
And Art said to
CC your-
CC or BCC yourself, either one. So CC is a carbon copy, a BCC is a blind carbon copy, right?
Yeah.
Because if you get a copy, when you sent it out, you can show that it went out, right? Because you got a copy at the same time that you just sent it. So that is a great way to do it, to provide that proof. But yes, Melissa, you can also ask for that. But if an agent is being uncooperative and not responding, I'm not sure how well you'll get a response to that. So that is a good question.
But this one here is perfect because they went back and forth about it.
They went back
There's
and
no
forth,
doubt.
so you know that they got it.
Yeah, and even if it goes to the junk, it's still considered delivered.
Yes,
Right.
yes. So actually, let me
Just
go
as
back to that.
received.
Let me go back to that because she just brought up, even if it goes to their junk, it is delivered. So it is considered delivered, and so why it's really, really important, please, if you are sending an offer out, please make sure you are following up with text or something else, because that agent may never see your offer and you're wondering why they're not responding. They don't even know about it, right? One of the worst things about technology is when it doesn't work, nobody knows it. Right? It's great. So-
You get like 800
Right.
emails a day. Sometimes it works and you don't.
Yeah, you get a lot of emails. So I'm gonna go on to the insurance claims, but I want to go back to something Melissa said. The method of delivery, there were 4 or 5 different ways of delivery. What was one way that was not mentioned? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? What is one way you cannot deliver things? It is not considered delivered.
You mean, but like you were saying, posting it in the listing?
Posting in the listing, that is one way. Yeah, if you put it in the listing, that does not mean it's been delivered. But what other way are you communicating all the time and it is not a method of delivery? Text.
Verbal.
So please understand, if you use text, it is not a method of delivery. Even if you attach something to your text and you send it over to them, you screenshotted it, it is not considered delivered. That is very clear. It is not considered delivery. Please don't use that. Put it in an email, send it over, use the text to say, hey, Art, want to make sure you got this, okay?
And that's including communicating to your clients, not just even to the other agent. Like you can't be like, hey, the camera sign.
Actually, that's not true. So Melissa's saying you can't do it for you giving it to your client. The only thing about that is that when you receive it, your client receives it. When you get it, it is considered receipt by your client. So how you communicate with your client is up to you, but the actual receipt is when you get it on behalf of your client. And people don't understand that. So if I got something at 11 p.m. and I don't forward it to my client until tomorrow at 5 a.m., what day was it delivered on?
Yes. the day before.
11 p.m. the day before, because it's when you get it,
You're
not
reminding
your
what?
client.
You have it.
Correct. So if it's considering your time clock and when it's starting, you already started at 11 p.m. Now, insurance claims history. I meant to have these separate, but I've gotten a couple of calls for whatever reason. Some insurance companies are having a difficult time. So let's start with two things. What are the 4 letters missing from this paragraph?
Oh,
Clue. Does anybody online know what clue stands for?
Comprehensive loss and underwriting
Exchange.
exchange.
That is correct. That is a term that used to be used by the real estate industry, and I use the word used to. It is not used anymore. The contract has been changed for, let's say, at least 5 years, okay? It is an insurance claims history,
Yeah.
and it's very clear that the seller is to ask the seller's insurance company or an insurance support organization, which would be one of those reporting agencies or consumer reporting agency, that's fine. And then what does it say after that? What's the next line? It's on 159. It's in big bold. I kind of made it big for you guys. I was
I don't know.
gonna add it later.
If unavailable from that, the seller can provide their own.
The seller can provide their own notice, right? So if they can't get it from anybody else, the seller can write a note and sign it and state, I have had no claims in the last 5 years. Because you know what? If they have had claims, the buyer can take them to court over it, okay?
Can we write that on a notice disclosure form and have them sign it? Or do they have to be the ones to type it in? Cause I've done that before, like. And
can probably
they
use
have
a
all
notice.
state for these dates and no
Yeah.
claims, okay.
Yeah, and I agree. I would put down, like Melissa is saying, I would put down, look, I've had Allstate insurance from whatever, 2015 to 2024, and I've had no claims. You only need 5 years of history, however. Okay? If you've lived there less than the 5 years, then you only give for the time that you actually have lived there. And people are like, but I don't have 5 years. Well, then you can't give more than what you own the property for, right? It's only on the property.
But if it was a true clue. We don't get those.
We don't get those anymore. All right. So this is something that came up recently, and I actually made a mistake on this. How many of you know about the VA escape clause? So what is the VA escape clause? What? So this has to do with the VA appraisal, canceling, VA buyer canceling due to the value of the property or the condition, right? Because an appraisal could have an issue with the condition. that would not allow the appraisal to go through. It does not meet the loan standards. In other words, there are electrical wires hanging down from the ceiling. A VA loan is not going to allow that to proceed, okay? The veteran would obtain their earnest money back. All right, this is a disclosure by law, and the disclosure form is required. Title will bring it up. You will, it usually comes from the lender first, but it usually goes through title as well to make sure that the VA buyer and the seller are signing off that they understand the buyer's earnest money cannot be held for that reason. So it's agreed, notwithstanding any other provisions, that the purchaser shall not incur any penalty by forfeiture of earnest money or otherwise be obligated to complete the purchase, ... if the contract purchase price or cost exceeds the reasonable value of the property established by the Department of Veterans Affairs. The purchaser shall, however, have the privilege and option of proceeding with the consummation of this contract without regard to the amount of reasonable value established by the Department of Veteran Affairs. What does that last sentence imply?
They can buy it anyway.
And what would they have to do?
Fix what-
Establish reasonable value? I don't know.
They'd have to add whatever dollar value is short. They do have the right to add to it, but they cannot be forced to.
Okay.
Okay, so they absolutely have the right to cancel, but if they wanted to, they could bring in the money. They could make arrangements to fix the damaged wood that was sitting in front of the house and tell the seller just remove the friggin' piece of wood, right? But yes, they can do that. I don't, from speaking from personal situation on a VA loan, there were big, huge pieces of wood that had dry rot in them, and we're like, no, we just remove the wood off there. So, you know, because termites, you cannot have termites, the VA will not approve it with termites evidence. Visible evidence of termites, they will not allow it. So though, but the veteran can cancel, or the veteran can find a way to move forward. All right. I went ahead and went to the broker hotline for some of these, and you'll see why in a few. Why on or before is a bad idea from the broker hotline. Facts. Buyer and seller enter into a contract with a close of escrow dated of April 27th. Language written in the additional terms and conditions states close of escrow to be on or before April 27th. On April 24th, the buyer notified the seller that his loan was ready, so he wanted to close on April 25th. The seller states that he cannot close on April 25th because his moving company isn't taking his items until April 26th. So, can the buyer demand the seller close on April 25th?
Yes, either party can try to force the other party to close.
So I have a demand, yes. We have a yes, we have a no. Anybody else?
You can at least
Yes,
send a cure
no.
notice And.
Yeah, send a cure and then it doesn't matter.
And then close on the 28th. Sorry, it's being recorded.
And the answer from the attorneys is no. Okay, but what happened here? What is the problem here?
Making,
Clarity.
upon written approval by both parties or something like that. That's normally what.
Both parties are in agreement.
We've got one side saying one thing, another side saying another thing. At best, everybody's confused, right? So,
You don't have a
what does it
meeting.
say?
Missing clarity.
The only agreed upon closing date is April 27th. Unless there's a meeting of the minds to move the closing date to April 25th, the agreed upon closing date remains April 27th. So here is the reason this is so important. The better practice is to identify a specific date for closing. The language on or before can be perceived as ambiguous and often creates confusion and differing expectations, as we found out here, right? One side says this, another side says that. Who is now in argument as we're trying to close this deal? Everybody, right? Not a good plan. Please, please, please do not use on or before. If you receive something that says on or before, respond with closing will be this. Call the agent and say, look, let's put it at that date. If we can do something earlier, we'll do an addendum to change it. All parties sign the addendum, you move the date up. not a problem, right? But this way, there is no ambiguity. You don't get somebody saying, hey, my loan's ready to close, I want to move in. Seller's saying, I'm on a ship for 2 more days. I can't get over there to finish packing my stuff. Not happening. Buyer's like, doesn't matter. We're going in. We're moving your stuff out. It's like, yeah, no, you can't do that, right?
There's that,
And I have a question.
there's a legal term, contra proponendo, whatever it is, that says the person who did the-
Breaking.
who wrote it. Was
Right.
that- Yeah, it is, it says, constructed,
Yeah, I heard that one.
it's constructed against the drafter, whoever drafted.
Oh,
it.
then, so Melissa's saying there's even legal language that says if you wrote it, you then are responsible for it
Yeah.
as the agent. So please don't write it.
Contra
just-
proponendo.
Just please do not write that in there. And if you see it, please get rid of it.
Always use
Just
the
tell
same.
everybody that you understand that. All right.
I have
Yeah.
a question only
Yes.
because I had one yesterday where I represent the buyer and we
Hi,
just,
Holly.
yeah, we just pushed closing up because he suddenly decided he wanted to close on Friday of Memorial Day weekend instead of the Tuesday following.
Right.
I'm told everything's in place, but it was making me really nervous because what if all of a sudden everything doesn't come together, for this 4-day earlier closing? How could I have protected my buyer in language?
In terms of moving the date, did you get
Yeah,
any?
and in terms of moving the date up, like what if suddenly, the docs don't show up or doesn't get recorded Friday by the afternoon time?
There's nothing you can do. So
There-
folks, this is a really good point. Anytime you're dealing with a situation where you have, where you have a holiday weekend, and actually I'll even step this back further. When I was doing my contracts, I would always set close of escrow for a Wednesday or a Thursday.
Mhm.
Because if you set it for a
Absolutely.
Friday and something goes wrong, you immediately lose 2 days. You automatically have to go to the Monday. You
Mhm.
can't get anything done over the weekend, okay? If you were going into a holiday weekend, I would have set the close of escrow for Thursday. That way, if something went wrong, you could get it done on Friday. Now, in this scenario, you're backing it up. The reality is anytime you're moving the close of escrow date, you are subject to the whims of whatever's going on. So unless you are completely in tune with that lender and the title company, that everything is ready to go on Friday, you really could have a situation that is out of your control, right? This is the problem as an agent. We can talk a great talk, but ultimately the end of the day, there's a closer for a lender. There's the title company representatives that are working on trying to get that through. But before a holiday,
We're gonna try to get home.
I
somebody
wouldn't do
may be
it.
trying to get home.
There- there-
Yeah.
there else.
Yeah, so on a holiday, there may be people on vacation, and this is very true. Oftentimes there's somebody on vacation, so
Mhm.
everybody's juggling who's doing it, and you're not dealing with the regular closer, somebody else has stepped in. I mean, you can have all sorts of things that can make that run amok. And who knows what happens with wiring funds here in Arizona, right?
I
So
can tell you, Melissa, I was a closer for JP Morgan Chase for 5 years. Let me tell you, do not do it. Do not put anything for a Friday before a long holiday. People are gone by noon. You will not get the same people. Your closer's not the
you're-
same one.
You're panicking Holly right now, I mean.
I,
You
you know
just
what?
closed, didn't you?
I-
Holly, did you
I
close?
am starting to panic because, well, it's amazing because it's a conventional loan and we're getting it closed in 2.5 weeks.
Oh, that's possible.
Well, yeah, I
Right.
mean, if you're in tune, like Melissa said, if you've got your title company, you've got your lender, I would definitely talk to the funder. I would talk to the closer, make sure that everything is in line, because if it doesn't record, there's a big problem. So just make
Right.
sure that you're in line.
Yeah, and that's a really important point, and maybe you can join into a conversation, Ami, with your experience when we have title and our lender talk about this. But I really want them to go over, and I'm not going to go into it in detail, but go over exactly what happens in those last 3 days. so that as agents, you have a better understanding that it's, you're talking to your lender that you've been dealing with, their hands are not on the file anymore. That is not who's handling the file. So we need to do that, but let me get on with the rest of this conversation here because we've still got some other stuff to do. And there we go. Okay, and again, if anybody is here that has to deal with these files, please do not make any comments. I don't remember whose this is. I just want to make sure. So we just talked about honor before. So can somebody read this and tell me what close of escrow date it is? Do you want me to read it out loud? Close of escrow date to be June 30th or within 10 days of the removal of the UCC filings. What is close of escrow date?
June 30.
I don't know.
I do not know, right? So not only does this not have an honor before, it has a truly unknown because we don't know when that removal date might be. So there's no way to know what COE is. So please don't do something like this because you don't have that close of escrow date. And again, folks, that close of escrow date, there are so many things that ricochet off the close of escrow date. Our lenders deal with it. We just had our lender show up from Epic. Good morning, Barb. So lenders deal with it. Title deals with it. Our offices deal with it. I mean, there are so many things that are based off of close of escrow date. When could you file a cure notice? June 30th?
July 12th.
Maybe, right? So maybe July 1st, right? So, I mean, again, this is where it becomes challenging. Please make sure there is one specific close of escrow date. Help your clients out. Make sure you're processing through carefully. All right. Here's another one from our broker hotline. All other terms and conditions remain the same. I love contract language and I've been dealing with contracts actually for a long time. Prior to becoming a realtor, I used contracts in Los Angeles. And I worked similarly to the way we work today. I had a law firm that wrote up a master contract for me, and I was allowed to write in the little lines that they gave me. I was not allowed to change the rest of the contract without going and finding the attorney to make changes. So here we go. A buyer presents an offer to the seller on the residential resale real estate purchase contract, the contract. The seller wishes to counter the purchase price in the inspection period. The listing agent counters the purchase price on counteroffer 1 stating, the purchase price shall be $200,000. All other terms and conditions remain the same. However, the listing agent also marked through the line 185 of the contract, crossing out 10 days and indicating the inspection period would be 5 days. So you have a counteroffer and you have changes to the boilerplate. Let's call it that way, right? They changed something on the main contract. So in the seller's counteroffer, should the listing agent have written all other terms and conditions remain the same if the seller actually countered additional terms of the contract?
I think they should be clarified because also even within purchase price alone, the terms of financing change sometimes.
I'm not worried about that. Let me, I don't know if I can go back. Can I go back? So this is saying purchase price should be 200,000. And I have seen this where somebody just writes 200,000. It does not address the 4 lines below that. I don't have an issue with that. I think it is pretty understood that the buyer has to adjust those however they need to adjust them. I don't believe the lender cares if those lines for earnest money and down payment on page 1 are addressed if we've changed the purchase price. The buyer has to adjust their purchase price per their pre-qual and their loan application. So I'm not sure that matters. I believe that's what you're referencing. Obviously, if the buyer can't afford a $200,000 property, that's a different thing. If they can only afford 190, that's a different story. But in this case, the question is, you wrote all other terms and conditions remain the same if there was something on the main contract that is literally being crossed out.
No.
And the attorney's answer is probably not, okay? So before a binding contract is formed, parties must mutually consent to material terms. So often disputes arise because ambiguity has occurred, right? The counteroffer language is ambiguous between the four corners of that document because it can be reasonably interpreted more than one way, right? So they should have actually countered all the items on the counteroffer. In other words, they should have said the inspection period is going to be 5 days on the counteroffer, not gone back to the main document. And just for point of clarification, I don't quite understand this in Arizona, but this is truly an Arizona thing because other states write all over their contracts. We do not touch our contract after it has been written. We do everything in a counteroffer or addendums afterwards, okay? So if you're going to make a change to the documents that you have in a counteroffer, please make all of those changes, then write all other terms and conditions remain the same.
Melissa?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Why would you even have to put all other terms and conditions to remain the same? You have a contract, you have a counter. That's your contract. Why do you have to say all other terms
So,
and conditions to remain? the same?
I'm not an attorney, but my understanding is, especially when you are doing counteroffer after counteroffer after counteroffer, right? So this is very important. Counteroffer 1 comes in and has a price on it, but it has 3 other things. Let's say the inspection period, right? Let's say the close of escrow date, okay, on counteroffer 1. Counteroffer 2 is only changing the price. You need to write all other terms and conditions remain the same because those other things on that counteroffer 1 move forward. Does that make sense? It's only what you change in that counteroffer that is being modified, and it really becomes an issue on these counteroffers. I've seen as many as 4 or 5 counteroffers, and people are like, well, no, we didn't agree to that. Like, yeah, you did. If you did not change that from counteroffer 1 and change it on counteroffer 2, you are agreeing to that. So I think the reason we use all other terms and conditions remain the same is so that everyone realizes that that information moves forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you should know that moves forward.
Yes, you
It's just
should.
you have your contract.
Your client doesn't necessarily. You might be aware of it because you do a lot of contracts.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, I have heard too many buyers, well, I didn't agree to that. Yes, you did. All of that moves forward. If you do not line item it out, it continues forward. And for instance, when you write in there that you're changing the inspection period from 10 to 5 days, and I've had clients say, well, I'm not signing the purchase contract. I said I didn't want a 10-day inspection period. I wanted a 5-day. Yes, that's why it's in the counteroffer. The counteroffer clearly changes that. That's why everything else that has not been changed moves forward. Right? So that's why. Yes. Okay. Got a couple more things. When is contract delivery? A buyer sent a seller a counteroffer to the resident to the contract. We're going to shorten that. Seller signed the counteroffer and provided it to his listing agent with instructions to deliver the acceptance to the buyer. Before the listing agent could deliver the accepted contract to the buyer, the seller called the listing agent and directed him not to deliver the acceptance.
Wow.
Okay. Was the contract acceptance already delivered?
Yes.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, when you receive it, it's delivered.
You have to complete the circle.
Well, it depends on which agent.
Yeah.
A buyer sent a counteroffer to the seller. The seller signed the counteroffer and gave it to his agent with instructions to deliver. Before the listing agent could deliver it, the seller called and said, don't deliver it.
Oh, good.
Oh, then it'd be no.
Why would the buyer be giving this?
The buyer gave a counteroffer.
Just the representing themselves.
Well, it doesn't matter. There was a
agent.
buyer's agent gave the seller a counteroffer. Seller gave his own agent, the listing agent, their response and said to deliver it. But before it got delivered to the buyer's agent, no, it was not delivered, right?
Right.
The delivery is the offer becomes binding when it has been delivered and received by the broker named in section 8Q. In this case, the accepted offer never left the seller's possession. Seller's agent is an extension of the seller, right? Seller's agent never sent it on, so neither was it neither delivered nor received. Oh, I meant to pull that up, but look, I have 10 minutes. Awesome. Okay, hold on. Yeah, let me get rid of stop sharing my screen. We've got people, look at all these people on here. Love this. Okay, you had a question.
I have a question going back to the contract with the inspection period where you said a counter was delivered, but the inspection period wasn't addressed on the counter, but the seller crossed it out on the contract.
Correct, because it,
So-
first of all, didn't get initialed by any other parties, which is an issue, right? So,
So where does it leave that? Does it still leave it as a 10-day inspection or is it remove the inspection? I mean,
well, it's ambiguous. That's the problem. We don't
So-
know. Because first of all, if the contract, this is why we don't modify our contracts, because every place you make a change, every party has to initial that.
okay, so nobody addresses that. 5 days goes by and the seller says, hey, the 5 days gone by and the buyer's still saying, hey, I never agreed to 5. I signed on 10. You changed out my approval. I still
Correct.
should have 10 days. So
You,
where does that? where does that fall?
it falls into trying to find a reasonable solution,
Right?
right? That's why we don't want changes made that way. Good morning, Barb. Look at you down there.
That won't be my issue.
So, yeah. Do you have any contract issues that you can think of from the lending perspective that become issues from the lender when there are time conflicts or date conflicts on the contract? Close of escrow date, you may have missed our close of escrow date.
No, I think that.
Okay.
Close of escrow date, I mean, yes, we need a real close of escrow date. I mean, the honor before thing is never good. Because sometimes we're working backwards depending on how tight our timeline is.
Correct.
I mean, my goal is always to close early, which I have been lately, which is awesome. But it's, if it's a tight timeline, then it's really difficult to have that ambiguous timeline.
Right.
As far as contract, I mean, usually if concessions change on the contract, so you have one amount on the contract, sometimes the counter or the Binzer adds more concessions, right? Those are the ones where we really want to put both amounts
Yes.
on the counter, not the counter, the addendum. That would say original plus this, so there's
Yes.
a total, that's something that's.
Or in
big.
addition to already agreed upon seller concessions and additional
Right.
5,000 or what.
For
We
a
get all.
total of,
You get
so
all that.
everyone is on the same page.
So making sure everybody's hearing that is you're gonna list the new amount, you're gonna reference the old amount, and you're gonna put a total amount of concessions. So that it's all on one addendum, so everybody can see that. Because that is a big confusing issue that comes through.
It
We
becomes
never want it to be,
ambiguous.
confusing, right? We want it to be very clear. The other thing that I've seen is, when some furniture conveys and stuff like that, they want to put that in the contract and that can skew with the appraiser views. And so we really want a separate bill of sale for things like that.
Yeah, that's our rule of thumb. If there's a loan on it, please put any additional personal items on a separate bill of sale or have your buyer or seller do that. We do not sell personal property. But if there's a loan on there, that it needs to be separate because yes, we have seen appraisers decide that beautiful art painting on the wall is now worth $30,000 and all of a sudden that goes into the purchase price, whether you like it or not. And that's not a joke. That really can happen. So you have to be very careful about it. So anything else, Art?
No, I'm reiterating what Barbara said about the additional concessions, clarify and make sure, because it becomes ambiguous, kind of like the inspection thing. I get an addendum saying seller agrees to $5,000 credit to buyer. Is that in addition to that, or is that in place of the other one? We need to clarify. We both need to clarify, me and Barb, the lender. So, yeah.
One of the other things I noticed this week was the community addendum and the HOA addendum, make sure they match. We had a confusion with like HOA transfer fee. On the HOA, it said it was seller. On the community addendum, it said it was buyer. So then we had to do another addendum. So it just saves people time if it's all equal and the same.
Does everybody know what the community addendum that she's referring to is? There is a,
Mhm.
yeah, it's for the Sun
Sun
Cities, there's, and retirement communities, not just the Sun Cities. So, retirement communities have another addendum. Actually, the Sun Cities their HOA is like they don't really have an HOA.
HOA is
It's
voluntary.
$25 and it's voluntary in Sun City.
But
Okay,
not,
that's
so-
all
Sun
are a little different. like
Right,
this-
they're all different,
this
so,
particular client has a 200 on the HOA
Right.
plus 5,000 community fund plus 2,300.
that's
I
Sun
mean,
City Grand, right?
Right, it's
So it's
crazy.
different. So, somebody was saying, can you explain that more? Which one were you asking, Sherry? Or I'm sorry, is it Sherry? I can't tell. Shan? Shan. Which one did you want more explanation on? The HOA and community addendum? I can't tell. Yes. Okay, so there is a community addendum that is for adult communities. And that form can be found in our working documents under SkySlope, under our working documents, not SkySlope forms. It's not an AAR form. It's actually a WeServe form, Western Southeastern Realtors of the Valley form. It's called the Adult Community Addendum. They developed it a long time ago for the Sun Cities, and it's been expanded for some of the areas in the South Valley, Southeastern Valley that are also a part of retirement communities. It is separate from an HOA addendum. Some of the Sun Cities do not have HOAs, really, that operate as we're used to having an HOA with a monthly fee, et cetera. They have rec center fees, and those are a part of that community addendum. They're defined there. Because depending on what community you're in, depends if it's per person, per house, per who's on the deed on the house. It all depends on how it's written. So you need to call those community associations and find out that information. You really should not be putting the community information on an HOA addendum unless it's actually the HOA. And in this scenario, it was Sun City Grand, which actually has an HOA, and it has a cap improvement fee that is a part of the HOA and not a part of the rec center. Very different from Sun City and Sun City West. So again, if you're not familiar with the area, please find somebody that is to help walk you through that, okay? Other questions?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So if a seller signs as an individual,
Oh,
then
yes.
afterwards says, oops, I forgot to tell you, the
Yes.
property is in a trust.
Oh,
How
I
do-
love these trusts.
how do you-
Yes.
How do you change over?
So, well, the question was that for those online, if you didn't hear all of that, the seller has signed the buyer, seller, doesn't matter.
Seller.
Seller has
Individual.
signed all of the documents as an individual. So I'll be the seller, Melissa Schwartz. And then all of a sudden go, oh, yeah, I forgot. I'm actually signing this as a company, an LLC. So why is it important that when you're dealing with companies or trusts or a power of attorney, that you have that comma and a title? Why is that important?
Well, you have to know who has the ability to sell the property.
So Mark says you have to know who has the ability to sell the property, correct? And if you've got an LLC, there may be one or multiple people that have to sign. Sometimes one person can sign, sometimes two have to sign, sometimes three have to sign, right? But legally, what is the distinction? Well, let me back up here. How many of you have PLLCs?
Mhm.
Couple of you? Anybody online? You can do thumbs up. I can actually see you guys now.
Yes.
Okay, so if you sign individually, what is your PLLC doing for you? Nothing, because you're not being protected by the PLLC because you didn't sign for the PLLC. You signed individually, which means you've, what is it called? Broken that shield, that protection, right? The PLLC is supposed to protect your liabilities, right? And protect your assets. If you sign as an individual on that document, everything can come back after you individually rather than going over to that entity, right? So why am I so agitated when I see people sign and then find out that there's an LLC or they're a power of attorney for somebody else or something like that, and they're just signing their name? Look, I'm going to sign for my mom, Melissa Schwartz. No, I'm not my mom. I'm just, no, you're signing now not as the trustee or the successor trustee for the trust. You're putting the liability on yourself, and you as an agent are not helping your client protect whatever they're supposed to be protecting. So, Mark, how do you change that? If you're having to change signatures on a contract, you can easily do an amendment that says, you know, all seller signatures previously executed on this contract shall be amended to read. And then you would say Melissa Schwartz, comma, member or owner, right? So and in that case, you would put them in quotes so that you make sure that that is what how they're being signed. And that's all you have to do. You do not go back and re-sign all those documents, but you have to reference back to those items.
Do they need to also put in that they accept all temporary terms and conditions as well?
No, because you're just changing the signature block. You're not changing what they've actually read. You're adding the title is what you're adding. You also probably have to change, if it wasn't done correctly, you might have to change the name on the contract. If the name is reading Melissa Schwartz instead of, you know, the Arizona Homes LLC. So if it said my name as the seller, and then all of a sudden I'm signing as an LLC, that doesn't make sense. So you might have to change the seller's name shall be amended to read, quote unquote. Now, most likely in this scenario, the name is correct. It was just how it was signed. Now, the biggest issue everybody's having with that, just so everybody knows, it's the electronic signature programs, right? We're having trouble, and I have not found a great solution. I've had people tell me they've found a solution around it, and that is that they are creating a seller name and then a separate signature. They're not using the seller name and trying to tie the signature block to that. They're creating a separate name as a separate seller that isn't dropping in the seller line that they're able to drag over with the email address on it for the signature block. I would like to see DigiSign, AuthentiSign, DocuSign. I mean, some of them have had, DocuSign had it before. I mean, I thought AuthentiSign had it before where you could designate the name. And I think the problem is, depending on where you create it, I think you can, but where you create it, when you follow the actual formatting to load in the new data, you can't put all the details in there. If you go to your contacts, and in your contacts, you actually edit the contact, there is a place to check a box that the seller is an LLC or a trust or an entity. And then you can designate the signature name, and it does work. But I'm having too many people have trouble getting that. So I'll take the cheat system to have a secondary one to be able to get the signature block correct. The problem is not that you guys aren't understanding it. It's that you're having trouble connecting it when you're sending through the signature blocks. And I understand that because I've talked to plenty of you who have said, that's how I set it up, but that's not how it came out. I'm like, okay, I understand that, but we've got to get it fixed because you're absolutely right. You have to have that end signature. Yes, Mark.
Just a real quick question.
Yeah.
So the addendum has to be signed by both, obviously, by both the buyer and seller. Okay. What happens if the buyer says, you know what, I changed my mind? Can the buyer at that point cancel the contract?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
So the question was, you have an addendum that has to be corrected. And then the buyer is now saying, you know what, I've changed my mind. I don't want to buy. Can they cancel at that point? So the problem is they just aren't signing an addendum. I think we would find another way to try and get through with the addendum. But the buyer, well, I would say this, the buyer can cancel. Of course, the buyer can cancel. they'll lose their earnest money because that's not grounds for them to be able to cancel and get their earnest money back. And, or whether or not the seller would take the earnest money and not pursue specific performance.
You mean the buyer would try to cancel because the seller is changing the name?
Well, they're just selling the
Well,
signature.
Well, the buyer, I get it.
I'm
Just
curious
asking the
what
question, but
addendums are.
what happens if the buyer says, I found another property, and the person that sold me this property is an individual. That individual doesn't own the property. The trust owns the
Oh.
property. That was my question.
Yeah.
No, because it's a clerical error. I just really don't think
Okay.
that that would be
Just-
grounds on it. But I'm not an attorney, folks,
Say again?
and I
There's
won't.
8 other ways to
Oh, I
cancel
know.
mine, other ways to cancel mine.
1A.
I have
So-
a question.
No
In
problem.
that scenario, what if like I represent the buyer? The seller is an LLC and that's how it's shown on title and things like that, but they've been signing as just the person's name and I thought it was
Right.
odd. They hadn't been putting the comma there and adding to it. Could we have any liability on the buyer side after closing?
No, it's
Okay.
all on them. And I have had title people tell me that they have been told by certain people that they don't need that comma. I'm gonna go by the fact that I've had attorneys tell us that we do need the comma, that I am, and title, that's the path I'm taking. I don't particularly want to go see an attorney every time I have to go through this with you guys. I think it's safer to put the comma there and the title there. And if you have an attorney or you have a client that is an attorney and says they don't need it, I'm not gonna argue that point. It's their document, right? That's fine. But the way I've been told is if you're an entity, you must have a title. If you're an individual, you don't have a title. So, and again, I have seen attorneys, I've had people say, I'm an attorney, I can do it this way. You know what? That's fine. You're the one signing it. You can do it however you want.
And then you have to have a title and they have to disclose in what capacity that person can sign, because I've seen LLCs have 4 members and 1 manager member, and it's manager managed, the LLC is manager managed, so none of those members have to sign, just that manager.
Right.
If there's 3 members and it's member managed, all those members have to sign. So that's why it's important to disclose that capacity.
And do you have to get a copy of that LLC to know who's supposed to be signing?
You get
So
the Corporation Commission.
So title does have to pull that from the Corporation Commission. Now, I will back that up, folks. If you are taking a listing and you know that it is the daughter of the owner who's deceased, you need to find out who is actually selling that property. Is it a trust? Is it an estate? Is it inherited already? Who owns it? Who has the right to sell it? Please figure that out before you list it. I had an agent in my office tell me flat out, no, this isn't a trust. We know it's already been dealt with. It's in the trust. It says it's, I saw the paperwork. I saw the trust paperwork. I pulled it up and the tax records say the person's name. I said, well, you better double check that information. So what had happened? Any guesses? Anybody want to guess what had happened? They'd refinanced it, pulled it out of the trust to refinance it, and they forgot to put it back in, and she passed away. They had to go to probate. So please understand, you can have a trust in front of you that, yeah, it's been in the trust. We have the trust documents. If it is not still recorded in the trust, it is not in the trust. So,
Will know.
oh, title will know, but you need to know, and you need to look at the tax records, because it was very clear it was not in the trust in the tax records. And she sat here saying adamantly it was in the trust. She went home and unfortunately had to tell her client some sad news because they had to go through probate. So it didn't list for a
I had
while.
a client that I recommended closing themselves. Because they're like, oh, I'll just do it later. And I'm like, you'll forget. You're not gonna do it.
Oh, to refinance?
Well, no, they bought a new place.
Oh.
And I knew they had a trust.
Yeah.
And I said, why aren't you closing on the trust? And he's like, oh, well, I'll just do it later. And I'm like, that tends to be a hassle and you forget. So I always recommend people closing their trust if they can.
And I've gone 10 minutes over, folks. We were 10 minutes ahead and now we're 10 minutes afterwards. Yeah, do you have,
And
Art has another
I
question.
wanna know that on the note that Barb's talking about, that does happen, but sometimes lenders won't let them close in a trust.
Correct.
But if you want to go into trust, we can do it to you, husband and wife, and you tell us you want to do it in trust, we'll do a courtesy deed right behind that and put it in the trust for you to protect you. So just so you know, that is
Yep.
some that we can offer. I don't know if other title companies do, but we're willing to do that for you.
Not all title companies will do that. So if you don't know Rock, say, if you don't know Art with Rock Title, and Barb over there is with Epic. So thank you guys so much. Thanks for joining me on this Tuesday morning and have a great week. Enjoy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, thank you.